was an American Christian man who took a vacation to the Holy Land to see Israel. And as he was walking along through one of the cities, there on the side of the street was a man begging for money. And this man was going to do what a lot of us are used to here in America, which is you just very politely decline to give money. So that's what he's going to do. So he came up to this man. This man, of course, held out his cup and asked for money, and the man politely declined. He was going to keep walking. When an Orthodox Jewish man who was seeing this just from across the street saw all this happen and came rushing up to this American man and just got right up in his face. Didn't say a word. I mean, you could smell his breath. He was so close. And he just glared into this man's eyes. And you could see the fire behind his pupils. And without breaking eye contact, he reaches into his coat pocket, pulls out a wad of cash, and sticks it in the cup of the beggar. Never saying a word, never breaking eye contact. But the message was clear to this tourist. This is what a righteous man does. A righteous man will pull his money out of his pocket and give it to a beggar no matter what. Granted, this Jewish man never looked at the beggar, never talked to him, never seemed to care about him, just put his money in there, glared at this other guy, and then went on his way. And that began to get this man to have this question kind of running through his mind a little bit. Well, how does a righteous person give? You just give money to people? Is it more than that? Is it deeper than that? Is that the best way to always do it? He had all these questions running through his mind based on that. And maybe you've been there too, where maybe you feel a little guilty because, Jesus calls us to be generous and to help those who are in need. But at the same time, just giving somebody money isn't always the best thing to do or the most helpful thing to do. And so we can feel pretty conflicted a lot of times. And so that's the question this man began to think as he was in Israel on this tour. Well, how does a righteous person give? How does that work? And so if you want to turn in your Bible or in your Bible app on your phone, you can head to Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. That's where we will be this morning. And as we're continuing studying the Sermon on the Mount, in chapter 6, we're going to get into a few different topics that Jesus is going to talk about. But his first verse kind of makes us pause and think. So chapter 6, verse 1, Jesus says, "Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven." Now, if you've been paying attention the last few weeks, you may hear that and go, wait a second. Hold on. Just hold on. Because I'm pretty sure Jesus has already been telling us that we're supposed to do things so that people will see it and praise our Father in heaven. Chapter 5, verse 16, just a few verses ago, Jesus said, "Let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." Hold up, Jesus. Do you want us to do things in public or not? Do you want people to know we're doing good things or not? What's the deal? What are you up to? And there's a key phrase in chapter 6, that first verse, that I want you to catch, and that's that phrase, "to be admired by others." That's the whole difference. That's why Jesus is not contradicting himself. He's digging in to something important. Because after chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount, it's pretty easy to walk away from that and think, well, my goodness, if we just did all these things in chapter 5, we'd be awesome people. People would love us. This would be incredible. This would be great. And so let's do that. And so when we turn the page and get to chapter 6, Jesus actually begins to teach on the danger of when you do things publicly, some of the temptations and the traps and pitfalls that can creep in. So over these next couple of sermons, we're actually going to be talking about how verse 1 actually applies to 3 different things. Because chapter 6, verse 1 actually applies all the way down to verse 18. Because there are 3 main ways that a Jewish person, which would have been Jesus' main audience, would practice righteousness: giving money to those in need, prayer, and fasting. And that's the next 3 things Jesus teaches on. So this morning, we're going to be in those first 4 verses of chapter 6, looking at how Jesus talks about giving money in a way that he would approve of. So listen to what Jesus says, verse 2 through 4. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth. They have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. The first thing that I want you to notice is that Jesus says, when you give, not if you give. He assumes we're giving. He's not going to talk about, well, should we give, should we not give? He says, no, when you give, because he's assuming you are, and you'll keep doing that. But he's going to talk about, well, how do you do that well? So his point is not, should we give or should we not give? His point is, how do you give well? And in these few verses, he challenges two hows of giving that people in his culture would do a lot. So the first one that he talks about is he mentions this, don't blow your trumpets. Don't toot your own horn, as you may have said or heard. And we actually have no historical evidence that anybody ever actually did that. Like, we don't actually think, somebody went up into church on synagogue on a Saturday and put their money in the offering, and somebody pulled out a trumpet and played a little salute or taps or something. We have no evidence that anybody ever did that. Like, okay, so Jesus, what are you talking about? Well, he might be playing on words just a little bit. Because typically, the thing that you would put your money in at synagogue service was kind of this big metal jar. Usually it was bronze, and it was shaped a little bit like the head of a trumpet. And so you would walk up, form a line one at a time. You'd go up and you'd throw your offering in there. And we do know that there are some people who really love to impress everybody. So they wanted to make sure you heard their offering. So, for example, if we just decided Campbellsville Christian Church, that's how we were going to start doing offering, and we put some kind of a big bronze jar up here and made you form a line and come up. Now, you could just, drop a check in there, and it would flutter to the bottom, and nobody would hear it. You could throw some paper money in there, and no one would really hear it. Or you could go to the bank and say, hey, I need, $100 in pennies. And you come lugging your bag of pennies up to church, and look around. Everybody hear that? I'm important. Look how much I gave. You heard it. I heard it. There you go. So Jesus could be playing on, yeah, I know what you do. I know you just get as many coins as you can, and you get just a big pouch of money, and that's what you drop in, because you want people to hear it. You want people to know how impressive and special you are, because look how much I gave. I'm pretty important. And that's a little bit of what maybe Jesus is getting at with them. It's like, what are you really doing? Now, I have a friend who's a teacher, and I was talking to her a couple weeks ago, and she was just talking about the challenge of rewarding kids in her classroom. Because, for example, she was talking about, rewarding kids for reading. It's like, well, if you throw them a pizza party, are you teaching them just to read for the sake of pizza? Are you really teaching them the joys of reading, or are you just teaching them that they just need a pizza party? And so she's like, you just got to be careful about what you reward people with. And maybe there's this popular phrase I've heard many times, maybe you have, and it's, what you win people with is what you win them to. What you win people with is what you win them to. So if you win kids to reading with a pizza party, you maybe have just actually won them to pizza, not reading. And there's all sorts of other places where that happens. And part of what Jesus is going to get at, not just in this passage, but the next couple of topics, is he's really getting at, what reward do you really want? And a deeper question is, well, who are you really following? Do you follow me, or are you following all the rewards and the benefits that you think I can give you? Why are you putting your money in that box? Why are you doing it the way you're doing it? And are you doing it for the right sorts of reasons? So for all of us, we could ask, okay, when we give money, Are we doing that for Jesus, or are we doing that for the pizza party? Are we doing these things because we truly love Jesus and care for Jesus and know that Jesus is actually so good, he doesn't really need to give us anything else? He's good enough just as he is. Or do we follow Jesus because we want some rewards, we want some benefits? Jesus is my ticket to heaven. Is that why we follow Jesus? Now, Jesus does so many good things for us, absolutely. But he's good enough, you can follow him if he gave you nothing else. That's how Jesus is. And if we don't really follow Jesus for Jesus, we will be easily tempted and tricked to follow any number of other things to get what we're actually after. So for example, if you really struggle with being a good enough person, whatever that means to you, whether it's, you want to be able to prove that you're productive, you're successful, you're a good enough mom or dad, or you're good at your job or whatever it is, now sure, Jesus can help you to know that you're good enough. Jesus can do that work. Or you can instead choose to follow something else. And you can work really long hours at your job to prove, see, I am good enough. I can build a successful company, or I can get enough clients, or I can sell enough things. I can do really good. Or at school, it's not just, I've got a B+ paper here. It's nope, I've got to have an A+ paper. It's not just that your classroom can be really well decorated and put together. It's no, this has got to be the best classroom in the whole school district. And I'm going to be here every night, and I'm going to make it as best as I can. And we have to be careful, because if we follow Jesus for something else, we're really just after the pizza party. We're not really after him. And so we have to be careful of the difference. Because some people, sure, they were doing the righteous thing, but they were really doing it because they just were after something else. They were just doing the thing to get what they really wanted. So I just try to think about, because none of us carry around a trumpet, and when we do something good, go, hey, look at me. So I was trying to think about, what are some things we do to help try to draw attention to our generosity? I just try to think of a few things, and even some good things that we get rewards for that maybe Jesus would have a problem with. So here's a few I thought of. One would be you give enough that you get your name on a building or a classroom or any kind of room, or they put a plaque on some furniture or something that you help contribute or donate to. Maybe that's one. Another is the humble brag. You've known this if you've heard this. It's somebody tells you this story of something that you've done, and you try to really downplay your role in it. You try to make it sound like, it really wasn't about me. But when you hear it, it's like, you just want to make sure I know that you did this really awesome thing. Like, that's really what you're trying to tell the story, so I know you did something great. And maybe you've seen this other one on social media. Somebody goes to serve somewhere, and they post a selfie of themselves at the service project. It's like, well, did you go to serve, or did you go to make sure we all know that you're serving? Like, the classic example is somebody goes on a mission trip, and they take a selfie of them with a bunch of kids from that other country. It's like, okay, it's not terrible, but what's your point? Like, are you trying to impress everybody and make sure we all know you're serving, or what's going on? Another one is sometimes we're tempted to feel entitled to certain treatment or certain benefits because of how much we give to something. Now, this is something I hear other pastors talk about, where it's this very scary conversation where a church member, usually meaning well, but they'll start off like this. They'll say, hey, pastor, I've been at this church for 40 years, and I've given a lot of money over those 40 years, and I really think you should ... Or they get a little more upset at you because you didn't do what they wanted to say. Now listen, if you don't do X, me and my money, we're walking. And that's a hard moment, but all the pastors I've studied under have told me, when you hear that, you say, all right, see you later. You just don't let people hold God hostage with their wallets. But sometimes we're tempted because we've seen that elsewhere. We see people get their name on something. We see that, you gave a lot of money and they started to listen to you. So maybe that's what I need to do. We just see this other places, and so we can be tempted to do that with our money and God. But Jesus says, well, those people, they've already got the reward. The people who blow their trumpets, they've got their reward already. So really, it's a question of, so is that really what you want your reward to be? You really want your reward to be some big plastic letters on the side of a brick building? That's really what you want? Or you really want your reward to be this little shiny plate that we stick on something? Like, that's really what you want? Okay. I would much rather have whatever Jesus wants to give me. Give me whatever it is. I'd much rather have whatever he thinks is a good reward. I'd rather take that. And so we have to really challenge ourselves. Are we following Jesus, or are we doing the things that Jesus tells us for the pizza party? Or are we doing things because we just love Jesus so much and he's just so good? Like, absolutely. So we have to be careful about our motivations, because sometimes we really want people to know what we're doing. We just want them to see, we want to feel important, we want to feel special, and Jesus is challenging that. So there's a huge sense in which our giving is just anonymous, it's secret, it's hidden. It's done in a way so no one really knows what's going on. And then he goes on to talk about don't let your left hand know what the right hand is doing. And that's probably just a little bit of a metaphor that Jesus used just to talk about how important it is that it's so secretive. Because for most of us, we would say, I have no idea how I'm supposed to do that. Unless you have a really bad memory and you leave things around the house, and you're like, well, that's easy. Give me 10 minutes and I'll totally forget where I put my car keys. Easy. But Jesus is really pressing us to really think carefully about, do you have another agenda? Do you have a secret plan going on? What are you really up to? And there's a sense in which the way that we give and the way that we are generous is almost sort of just a natural reflex. You just can't help but be generous, be kind, help people. It just sort of flows out of you, and you can't really keep track. And if somebody asks you, hey, how many people have you helped? You'd have I have no good way to answer that. I don't know. It just sort of flows out. It's hard to know. And here over the last year here at the church, we've made some huge financial kind of milestones where we got all the way out of debt, and so we earlier in the year voted to get the budget readjusted so we could be more generous. And if you were here for the annual meeting in the previous hour, you got to see the budget for next year, and so we're just working on being more generous. How can we help free up our money so God can use it to bless others and to move his mission forward? And so one of the things that's changed, if you've been around here a while, is you don't have to designate your offering or your check anymore. That's the way it used to work, used to operate, but we've kind of readjusted the budget so that whenever you give to this church, it's automatically distributed in the percentages that we've designated. And so every time you give, 20% immediately is going to go towards missionaries, both here in America and in other countries, and to support local ministries just right here in our own town and community. So you get to know that. And I understand that, there's definitely a practical way to designate funds, and that can help. And I also know there can be a heart in designating funds because you have something you really care about and you see a need and you really want to make sure, hey, I want to make sure that need gets met. So I'm going to designate my money so we make sure we help with that thing. But I want to make sure I challenge your heart in that. Because if you're really, really honest, was there ever a time where maybe you designated some money more so because you just really wanted to be in control of it? You want to say, hey, God, I don't think I trust you with this, so I'm going to label it so I make sure it goes where I really want it to go. Because that happens in other places. But God really challenges us with our giving and our offering to be, hey, we give it to him, and he gets to decide where it goes and how it gets used. And so sometimes Jesus really challenges our heart. What are you really doing? Does your right hand know what your left hand's doing? And maybe, just maybe, I'm reading into this a little too much. But in Jesus' culture, the right hand was the honorable hand, and the left hand was the dishonorable hand. And so I don't know, but maybe there's a point, too, where Jesus is saying, when you give, don't have this secret plan in your back pocket that you're trying to use your money for. Don't have this sort of manipulative strategy, like, well, I'll give in such a way so that I can get this done or make this happen. Just give. Just trust God. Let him do it. Let him take care of it. He can handle it. Now, there's this other passage in Matthew that I think kind of helps expand and illustrate a little more of what Jesus is talking about here. In Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is teaching in this long sermon on discipline, and he says this. He says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Well, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in? Or needing clothes and clothe you? We never saw you sick or in prison and came to visit you." Like, what are you talking about? The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then the king will turn to those on the left and say, "Away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons." That's how you know Jesus is serious. "For I was hungry, and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger, and you never invited me into your home. I was naked, and you never clothed me. I was sick and in prison, and you never visited me." Then they will reply, "Well, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and not help you?" And he will answer, "I tell you the truth. When you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were refusing to help me." For both the righteous and the unrighteous in that illustration, in that teaching, they actually did the exact same thing. The righteous were surprised because their right hand and their left hand had no idea what was going on. Their generosity was kind of just automatic. They're like, "Well, Jesus, we never saw you." Like, "Exactly. You helped so many people, and you were really helping me when you did that." And the unrighteous are surprised because the way that they treat people is just automatic. That's just what they do. Because Jesus said in chapter 5, "Well, if you only love those who love you, what reward is there for that? Everybody does that. Everybody loves people who can help them out and love them back. But if you love the people who don't love you, that's huge." And Jesus' point is the way that we treat other people a lot of times is just sort of our natural reaction already. Like, we're either already used to helping people out and being generous, or we're not. You either walk around and see people and you say, "Man, that's a tough situation. How can I help? What can I do?" And your heart breaks and you begin to try to figure out, "Man, what can we do to help this person?" Or you see somebody else in need and you just kind of tense up and you're like, "Whatever, they have no idea what my life's like." Or you just ignore them, like, "Yeah." But Jesus really leans into this. Because when you help people the way Jesus wants you to help them, you will be shocked at how many people you've helped. Because you won't really be able to keep a record. You won't be able to keep track. It'll just kind of be surprising. So how does a righteous person give? Well, Jesus' point is, a righteous person gives so only God knows. In some sense, even you don't really know. Which I know sounds weird if you have like a budget and you have your line items, or like, here's my offering line item. Here's where I've given. It's like, you won't even know all that's happened and all that's gone on. So I have a friend who's a youth minister, and he's got this guy in his youth group that everybody just calls Junior. And at his church, they've got quite a bit of just a couple grass fields and a lot of grass to be mowed on the property. And they kind of had a local guy who they had contracted to mow. And he got older and was like, "Hey, I'm retiring from my lawn care business, so I'm not going to be mowing your church anymore." And so as the church was trying to figure out, okay, who do we get to mow the yard now? Well, the youth minister, my buddy, he said, "Well, what if we had the youth group mow? We got plenty of people who could do that, or we could teach them. And what if instead of paying somebody, we just paid the people in the youth group who helped with that, and that could be like our fundraiser. So that way, whatever they need to do at camp or we do mission trips or whatever, they've got some money that our students can use to go on those trips. And they thought, well, sounds like a cool idea. All right, we'll do that. We'll just do that. So something you keep track of who shows up and how much each person gets, and we'll just transfer the lawn mowing money into the youth budget. And then whenever they need to go on a trip, there you go. They've kind of got their own accounts that they can use. So the first Saturday, late spring, time to start mowing. Junior's the only person who shows up. Lots of people thought it'd be cool and, make some money, that'd be neat. Junior's it. So it's Junior and his lawnmower. All right? So for 4.5 hours, Junior's outside Saturday morning. He's not playing video games. He's not getting to, hang out at home. He's mowing the yard by himself. And it's starting to get hot out. And he's like, oh my goodness, this takes forever. Well, second week, he got a buddy to agree to help him. And so Junior, would borrow his dad's pickup truck, and he would, at his house, get his lawnmower in the back of the truck and put the weed eater in there, and then he would drive over to his buddy's house, and they would put his lawnmower in the back and his weed eater in the back and a couple jugs for fuel, and they would drive down to the church, and they just kind of divide and conquer. Like, all right, I'll mow this part, you mow that part, your part's shorter, so then you switch over to trimming around the edges, and okay, we'll get this done. Took about 2.5, 3 hours. Then they got into a rhythm, and it got quicker and quicker, and they kept inviting their buddies from youth group, hey, you should really come help us mow. It's really not that hard. It'll go so much faster if there's more of us, and we have like 5 lawnmowers. That'd be great. And they just keep, and summer's coming. It's going to be really hot out. It'd be nice to get done by 10 instead of 1. It'd be great. But still, not a lot of people would show up to help, just them. So, summer came. That means camp and youth conferences, and they've got way more money than they need. So they can pay their own way 3 times over. And they keep mowing. This goes on pretty much every summer for the whole 4 years that Junior's in high school. Just every summer, just him and a couple other guys mowing, and he has way more money than he needs. So during that first summer, what he decided, he went to his youth minister and he said, look, I'm sure I've got way too much in my account to pay for everything. He's like, yeah, you could go to camp 7 times if you want. He's like, well, I don't need to do that. So he said, how about you just pull money from my account for anybody else in the youth group who needs help going on a trip. You don't need to get my permission. You just do it. I don't care. I'm fine. It's like, all right, I'll do that. And so the youth minister just would kind of randomly, he knew what students were in kind of some tough financial spots, and he would just let them know, hey, I know you really want to go to camp, or I know you really want to go on this mission trip we're going to take. I know you're a little short. Hey, you've got it covered. Somebody took care of you for that. Oh, that's great. And so for 4 years of Junior's high school career, all these kids got to go to camps and conferences and mission trips and get help because he was just willing to, hey, give my money. He had no idea how much was in that account. He just showed up and mowed, and hey, whoever needs help, you help them. So after he graduated from high school, his youth minister gave him a little financial report that listed just all the different people he had been able to help send somewhere. And there were all these names on that list of all these people who got to go to the camp, and his youth minister would add little notes like, hey, on this mission trip, this person talked to me about getting more committed in our youth group. Hey, at this week of camp, this student told me about a serious problem they had, and we were able to help them. Hey, when this student was able to come help us, at a weekend of a kids ministry conference, and we were able to help pay for them to go because of this, and all the little ways that this had helped. And that high school student never realized just how much money he had made from mowing from the church every summer for 4 years. He was just blown away by that. That's what Jesus means. You give in such a way that you have no idea how much you've helped. But I promise you, if you help people the way Jesus wants, in a secretive way, in a way where no one really knows what you're doing, you can't even keep track, you will help more people than you ever imagined you could have. But if you do it the other way, if you try to always do it because there's sort of a secret agenda or you really want people to know, you already got your reward. And it's not that great. That little financial report that Junior got, that's way better than getting his name on something in the church building. Or having a lawnmower. This is the Junior lawnmower, He that he got to see what God did with that. So how can we do that? Let's pray. Dear Jesus, I thank you so much for your example of generosity towards us, but also for your challenge to our own hearts. And so, God, I just pray that your Holy Spirit would convict us when we are tempted to use our money in ways that are maybe selfish or just not the way you want. Help us to trust you, because it's all yours anyway, and we are so thankful for the ways that you take care of us, but also that you invite us in to help others. And so I pray you would multiply whatever it is we can do to help. And you would stretch those funds or that willingness to serve in a way to bless people in ways we could never imagine. Because you know, God, what everybody around us needs to have their life changed. And I just thank you for when we get to be a part of that, and pray that you would continue to use us in that way. In the name of Jesus, I pray.